Hello everyone, welcome to Unacademy's YouTube channel. Let's crack UPSC CSE English YouTube channel. Now, the topic that we will be looking today is center-state relations. In center-state relations, we will be looking at legislative relations. Is that clear? So if you wish to follow videos regarding polity as well as current affairs, do follow Unacademy's YouTube channel and don't forget to click on a bell icon so that you can receive notification as soon as we upload a particular class or if you are planning to take live classes. Now before going on to the class itself, let me give you a brief introduction on Unacademy as well as about myself. See, my name is Aravind. I have completed my BE Mechanical Engineering in 2014. I have almost 3 years of experience in teaching UPSC Civil Services and I have experienced all stages of UPSC Civil Services. My specialization subjects include polity, international relations and lastly current affairs. Now this is my phone number 9443218545. So if you have any doubts regarding the classes that I have taught you or regarding the classes that I am going to teach you, you can contact me in this number, and then this is my Telegram link. You can also contact me using this Telegram link. Is it clear, everyone? Now let's move on to the Unacademy part. See, Unacademy is the largest online platform in India. Unacademy being the largest online platform in India, it has the capacity to congregate all top educators from all over India and they get to teach from Unacademy platform. See, if you are going to an offline institution, you will be learning a particular subject from a particular sir which is assigned by you by that institute. You will be learning from only one educator. But in case of Unacademy, if you want to learn history, you can learn history from number of top educators. That's a benefit that Unacademy provides you with. Not only that, you can access daily live classes made by these educators. In these daily live classes, you can comment on them, you can ask doubts then and there itself, and you can watch those daily live classes as soon even after particular days. So all these live classes you can watch offline. And importantly, all Unacademy classes are structured in nature so that the learning process for you becomes much easier and you get unlimited access to all videos concerned with UPSC examination preparation. Clear? One, classes are structured in nature for that the learning process for you becomes easy as well as lucid, and you get unlimited access to all videos made under UPSC platform. Okay, so these are the advantages that we'll get by subscribing to any subscription platform. Now recently, based on students' request, Unacademy has introduced a new type of platform called as Iconic platform. Right now, Unacademy is having two types of platform. One is Plus platform, which is a normal one, and recently they have introduced a new type of platform called as Iconic platform. Now what's the difference between Plus as well as Iconic platform? In case of Plus platform, as I mentioned before, it's all about teaching, where top educators from all over India, they congregate together and they get to share their knowledge with you. But in case of Iconic platform, especially for an exam like UPSC, you require some constant guidance. You are preparing for 1 or 2 years, right? So in this 1 or 2 years, you will be acquiring a lot of information. You have to read a lot of books. So there's a definite possibility that in some areas you'll be doing some things wrong. So to prevent that from happening, Unacademy will provide you with a personal mentor. Now that personal mentor is someone who has vast experience as well as knowledge in UPSC preparation and somehow even cleared UPSC itself. So those mentors, based on their experience as well as knowledge, they will guide you through all the process of your preparation and all exams of UPSC preparation. Clear? So that's how Iconic platform is different from Plus. Plus is all about teaching, Iconic is all about mentorship. Clear? Now if you wish to subscribe to Plus or Iconic platform, if you go to a subscription page, you will be given with two options. One is for Plus, another one is for Iconic platform. So if you click on Iconic platform and then continue with Iconic, you will subscribe to Iconic platform. The amount charged by Iconic platform will be somewhat higher compared to Plus platform. Clear? See, these are the differences between Plus and Iconic platform. In Plus, you can get access to live classes, test series, unlimited practice as well as structured schedule. But in case of Iconic platform, you will get personal coach, daily mains question and answer practice, study planner and personalized feedback. So these are the extra things that you will get in Iconic platform. Is it clear, everyone? Now this is the main advantage with Unacademy. So compared with any institution in India, no such institution offers such ridiculous prices, such low prices. This is almost 1/5 of amount charged by other traditional offline institution. So do subscribe to Unacademy. It provides you with a lot of advantages, and don't forget to use my code ARAVINDV. If you're using my code ARAVINDV, you get 10% offer as well. So if you are subscribing for 12-month plan, instead of paying for 36,000, you'll be paying around 32,400. So it gives you 10% discount. So don't forget to use my code ARAVINDV if you are planning to subscribe to Unacademy's subscription platform. Now, see, this is my phone number, 944321855, and this is my Telegram link. And if you wish to contact based on this particular class or any class that I have taught you in Unacademy's YouTube channel, you can contact me here, and don't forget to use my code ARAVINDV. Now let's move on to the class itself. Now before going on to the class, before we talk about center-state relations, first we have to talk about the concept of federalism. Now, what is the meaning of federalism? What is the definition of federalism? See, federalism is nothing but a type of government. With two or more levels of government. Is it clear? Federalism is nothing but a type of government which has two or more levels of government. Okay, so there will be, in federalism, there will be a written constitution. Under written constitution, there will be two or more levels of government. That is central government in case of India, as well as state government, and then local self-government. Clear? In India, we have three levels of government. So India India follows three-tier federal structure. Is it clear? Because India has three levels of government, that's why India can be termed as a country having three-tier federal structure. And also importantly, apart from written constitution, there should be a concept called as division of power, separating the powers between different levels of government. Clear? Apart from having two or more levels of government, federal government should also have a concept called as division of power. What is the meaning of this concept, division of power? Division of power is nothing but, in constitution itself, it will demarcate the power. This power belongs to central government, this power belongs to state government. All these things, it will be demarcated in the constitution itself. That concept is called as division of power. So that's the definition of federalism. Clear? Now we'll move on to the next part. Now next part, in center-state relations, what we will be learning is, as I mentioned before, in federal country there will be central government as well as state government. Now, what is the objective of central government as well as state government? What is their objective? What is their ultimate objective? Both central government as well as state government, they will be working for welfare of the people. Is it clear? Both of them, they will be working for the welfare of the people. So the end goal for both central government as well as state government is same. Yeah, the end goal is same, that is welfare of the people. So if end goal is same, it is desirable that beyond the division of power, there are in certain areas both central government as well as state government, they have to cooperate with each other. Clear? Beyond division of power is done away with. In division of power, we will declare in what area central government is supreme, in what area central state government is supreme. All these things we will demarcate in division of power. Apart from the demarcation of power, in some areas it requires cooperation between these two levels of government, right? Only when they are cooperating, they can attain the objective of achieving welfare for the people, right? So in center-state relations, what we will be learning is, see, I will give you an example. One of the main objective of government of India is to improve health indicators. Clear? Now, to improve health indicators, if we are following strict demarcation of power, what will happen? Central government will prepare one health plan, state government will prepare one health plan. If two governments are preparing two different types of plans, what will happen? One, wastage of resources will happen. Apart from wastage of resources, two governments will be constantly fighting with each other. A lot of resources will get wasted. So these are the problems when these two levels of government will know they are not cooperating with each other. So to solve this problem, constitution has provided with a separate chapter called as center state relations, where we get to demarcate the power of both central government and state government. Also, we will demarcate in which areas they will cooperate with each other. Is it clear? So in center state relations, we will study in what areas central government is supreme, in what areas central government is supreme, and in what areas state government is supreme. Also, in what areas they cooperate with each other. Clear? First, we will study in what areas in center state relations. That's the objective of class. This is the objective of this class. In what areas both central government and state government are dominant. Next one is in what areas they cooperate with each other. They cooperate. So these are the things that we'll be learning in center state relations. What areas both central government as well as state government are dominant, in what areas they cooperate. So we will discuss this center state relations from three perspectives. One, from the perspective of legislative relations, from the perspective of executive relations, from the perspective of financial relations. Clear? So all three levels of government, in what way power is demarcated and what way we are cooperating with each other, we will discuss. Now, importantly, as I mentioned in my introduction class itself, whenever we talk about government has three bodies: legislative, executive, and judiciary. But in case of center state relations, we will be discussing only demarcation of power from legislative as well as executive perspective. We will not be discussing demarcation from judicial point of view. Why? Because in India, judiciary is integrated. There is no division of power for judiciary in India. In India, judiciary is integrated. It does not have federal structure, unlike US Constitution. Is it clear, everyone? Unlike US Constitution, judiciary does not have division of power in Indian context. We have integrated judiciary. That's why in center state relations, we will not be discussing judicial relations. Instead of judicial relations, we will be discussing financial relations. Clear? Now let's move on to the next part. For the first part of today, this is the topic that we will be discussing today. The topic that we will be discussing today is legislative relations. The topic of legislative relations. Now, in legislative relations, what did I tell you before? In what will we discuss in center state relations? One, in what areas central government enjoys power, in what areas state government enjoys powers, in what areas they cooperate with each other. So first we have to define in what areas central government is supreme and what areas state government is supreme. What is that? It's a concept of division of power. So first we will discuss the concept of distribution of legislative power. First we will discuss the concept of distribution of legislative power. After discussing this, we will discuss cooperation. Clear? Cooperation between central government as well as state government. Now, in center state relations, whenever I talk about cooperation, whenever I talk about the concept of cooperation, it is usually central government which dominates state government. Clear? Whenever I talk about cooperation, in cooperation, what happens? Central government will dominate state government. Clear? Central government will dominate state government. So we will be discussing in cooperation. We will be discussing Parliament control over state list. Parliament's control over state list. Is it clear? Next, we will look at central government control over state legislation. State legislation. So these are the things that we will be looking in legislative relations. One is under normal circumstances, we will discuss distribution of power. Now under extraordinary circumstances, both central government as well as state government has to cooperate. Those extraordinary circumstances will include parliament control over state list as well as central government control over state legislation. Clear? In every scenario, for every scenario, constitution has envisaged one normal scenario and extraordinary circumstances. Constitution has envisaged both normal circumstances as well as extraordinary circumstances. I'll give you some examples. In normal circumstances, if you want to pass a law has to be passed by both the houses of the parliament, and then a president has to give his assent. But in extraordinary circumstances, president is empowered to issue ordinances. In extraordinary circumstances, emergency can be imposed in the lieu of national security, in the lieu of breakdown of law and order in a particular state. So based on these particular circumstances, based on these particular extraordinary circumstances, emergency can be imposed. Similarly, even in center-state relations, constitution has envisaged normal circumstances as well as extraordinary circumstances. In normal circumstances, distribution of legislative power will apply. Normal distribution of power between central government and state government will apply. But during extraordinary circumstances, parliament can exercise control over state list and central government can control over state legislation. Is it clear, everyone? Now, in wait here. Now, in distribution of legislative power, we will be discussing two things: how distribution of legislative power happens territorially. Clear? Also, how distribution of legislative powers will happen in the manner of subjects. Clear? How power is distributed in legislative relations in case of territory, how power is distributed between central government and state government in terms of subjects. So these are the two things that we will be discussing. Okay, now let's move on to the first one. Territorial. First topic of today is territorial distribution of legislative power. Territorial distribution of legislative power, that is given in Article 245. Is it clear? Territorial distribution of legislative power is given in Article 245. Now, under Article 245, we have to discuss two things: central law as well as state law. Clear? We will be discussing two things: central law as well as state law. Now, in central law, see, central law will be passed by whom? Central law will be passed by parliament. State law will be passed by state legislature. Now, whenever parliament is passing a central law, that central law will be applicable throughout India, or it is applicable to any part of India. Now, what is the meaning of this particular term, any part of India? I'll give you an example. Take the example of, take the example of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Now, where does 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act apply? It applies only in rural areas. It doesn't apply in urban areas. So this act is being selectively applied in selective parts of country. So if this is India, this act applies only in certain parts of the country. It doesn't apply to throughout India. Another one is coastal regulation zone. Coastal regulation zone applies only to coastal areas. It doesn't apply to other areas. Hill Area Development Act. This act applies only areas which are in hilly areas. It doesn't apply to other areas. So the first provision under Article 245 says that central law is either applicable throughout of India or any part of India. Similarly, state law will be applicable will be applicable throughout state or any part of state Is it clear? Similar to central law, state law is applicable throughout state law or any part of state. Now, before going on to the next topic, I'll give you one scenario. Before going on to the next point, we will talk about I'll give you one scenario. See here. If this is India, this is Tamil Nadu, and this is Kerala. Clear? Tamil Nadu, as I mentioned before, can make laws for entirety of Tamil Nadu or any part of Tamil Nadu. But can Tamil Nadu make laws for Kerala? It cannot, right? If that provision is there, Tamil Nadu can easily state that Mullai Periyar Dam belongs to Tamil Nadu. Mullai Periyar Dam already belongs to Tamil Nadu. Mullai Periyar Dam water entirely belongs to Tamil Nadu. In fact, all water originating from Kerala belongs to Tamil Nadu. Such things can happen, right? Now, to prevent that from happening, Tamil Nadu cannot legislate into Tamil Nadu cannot make legislations for Kerala. Why? Because one, it violates the principle of federalism. Both Tamil Nadu and Kerala are independent federal units. They are independent of each other. So that's why Tamil Nadu cannot make legislations for Kerala. So that's why in case of state law, there is no extraterritorial jurisdiction. In case of state law, there is no extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now these two things are called as territorial jurisdiction, in which areas a particular jurisdiction of a law will apply. But in case of state law, there is no extraterritorial jurisdiction. But in case of central law, there is extraterritorial jurisdiction. Meaning, Parliament not only can make laws for entirety of India, it can also make laws for persons who are residing out of India. For example, Citizenship Act. In case of recent Citizenship Amendment Act, what does it say? It says that people coming into India, if they are belonging of any religions like Hindu, Muslim and Jainism, Hindu, Christianity and Jainism, they will be liable to citizenship. So they are not only making laws for India, they are also making laws for outside of India, for NRIs, for confiscation of property, for a foreign contribution regulation act. So these are certain acts that give the example of extraterritorial jurisdiction of central law. Is it clear? So this extraterritorial jurisdiction that is given to state central law is called as doctrine of extraterritoriality. Clear? There is a particular doctrine called as doctrine of extraterritoriality. Based on this doctrine, extraterritorial jurisdiction is given only to central law. It is not given to state law. Is it clear? But importantly, wait here. But importantly, if there is a significant nexus between a person and a state, in that case territorial jurisdiction will apply. Will apply. Now, what is the meaning of if there is significant nexus between a person and state? In that case, territorial jurisdiction will apply. See, I'll give you an example. A person A, he is from the state of Orissa. Now, this person has gone to the state of Karnataka and he has committed a crime there. He has committed a crime in Karnataka. After committing crime, he has gone and residing in Orissa. Now, Karnataka police, what will they do? Karnataka police has gone to Orissa and they have arrested this person A. Now, after arresting this person, based on what laws they will convict this person? they will convict this person A based on Karnataka laws, because the person A has his deed committed in Karnataka. So there is a significant nexus between his act committed in Karnataka and the person A. So since there is a significant nexus, this person A will be tried based on Karnataka laws, not based on Orissa laws. Clear? So that's the thing called as, that's a concept called as, this particular doctrine is called as doctrine of territorial nexus. This particular doctrine is called as doctrine of territorial nexus. Clear? According to doctrine of territorial nexus, what will happen if there is a significant nexus between the subject and the state concerned? In that case, state law will apply. If there is no significant nexus between the subject and state, in that case, doctrine of extraterritoriality will apply. Clear? Is it clear, everyone? This is the demarcation of central law as well as state law when it comes to territorial demarcation. Now let's take a look at next exceptions for territorial application for central law. Next thing we will look is exceptions for central law in territorial application. Clear? I'll give you an example. Take for example, take this is central law. Here, as I mentioned before, central law is applicable, can be enforced throughout India or any part of India. But there are certain parts. See here, if this is India, there are certain parts like scheduled areas, Article 371 areas, union territories. Now, in these areas, the parliamentary law, the central law will not apply to those areas unless there is a special provision. Clear? There are certain areas like scheduled areas, Article 371 areas. In these areas, parliament law is not applied automatically. Is it clear? Now, what are those areas? Those areas include union territories. Schedule 5 as well as Schedule 6 areas. Before there was Jammu and Kashmir. Right now Jammu and Kashmir is removed from this exception. Jammu and Kashmir is just like normal union territories. The next one is Article 371. Clear? Now Schedule 5 as well as Article 371 we will discuss later in another class. What are those exceptions for application of parliamentary law? But for union territories alone we will discuss in this class. Clear? Now, in case of union territories, there is a under Article 240. In case of union territories under Article 240, there is a provision saying that president can make regulations for union territories. President can make regulations for union territories. These regulations have the force of law. These regulations have the effect of force of law. So if president is making any regulation for union territories, this regulation has the effect of force of law. They will be considered as force of law. So since they are considered as force of law, president can amend, repeal as well as accept any parliamentary law. Is it clear? Since president's regulation has a force of law, president can either amend, repeal or accept any parliamentary law. Clear? Unless president is not accepting it, parliamentary law will not be applicable to union territories. Now the exceptions regarding Schedule 5 as well as Schedule 6 areas, it's a very big topic. I will take in separate class. Clear? Now this is the exception regarding union territories. In union territories, according to Article 240, president can make regulations for the welfare of union territories. Those regulations have the effect of force of law. So based on those regulations, president can either amend, repeal or accept parliamentary law. Is it clear, everyone? Now let's move on to the next topic. Distribution of legislative power subjects. It is given in Article 246. Clear? It is given in Article 246, distribution of legislative power subjects. See, this distribution of legislative power subjects was borrowed from Government of India Act. It was borrowed from Government of India Act. 1935. It was inspired from Government of India Act 1935. So you have to analyze the reason why the Government of India Act 1935 has demarcated our legislative power in such a manner. Clear? In Government of India Act 1935, the subjects, number of subjects under Government of India has been demarcated into three lists. Okay, now first you have to understand the reason why they have been demarcated into these three lists, then only you will understand why this subject is included in central list, why this particular provision is included in concurrent list, all these things, then only you will understand. Clear? See, under Government of India Act 1935, the Government of India Act 1935 divided list into three types of list: central list, provincial list, and then concurrent list. Clear? Government of India Act divided our subjects into three lists: central list, provincial list, and then concurrent list. Now, what are the topics that are included in central list? Clear? Matters of national importance, and matters which require uniformity are included in. Here, matters of national importance as well as matters which require uniformity are included in central list. Now, what are the matters which are included in provincial list? Matters of regional importance plus matters which require diversity are included in provincial list. And what are the lists that are included in concurrent list? Matters which require cooperation between central government and provincial government are included in concurrent list. Okay, so that's based on this principle only, subjects were divided into central list, provincial list, and concurrent list. Okay, now after independence, this central list was incorporated as central list under Constitution of India. Provincial list was incorporated as state list under Constitution of India. Concurrent list was incorporated as concurrent list under Constitution of India. Is it clear? How, in what basis the subjects have been demarcated into central list, state list, as well as concurrent list? Is it clear, everyone? Now, what are the examples of certain examples of central list? As I mentioned before, matters which require national importance as well as uniformity. Example: defense, communication, currency. So these are some of the matters which are included in central list, because these are matters which require uniformity. Defense is a matter of national importance. Communication, is it preferable for every state to have certain communication protocols? Tamil Nadu having certain communication protocol, Jammu and Kashmir having different communication protocol. Is it desirable for the unity of our country? It's not, right? So that's why communication protocols requires uniformity throughout India. So that's why communication has been included in central list. Similarly, currency, is it desirable to have Andhra Pradesh separate currency, Maharashtra having separate currency? It's not, right? So that's why currency comes under central list. Now, what are the examples of matters under state list? Matters like law and order, agriculture, fisheries. So these are matters which come under state list. Now, why law and order is included under state list? Because the law and order scenario in Jharkhand is different to law and order scenario in Tamil Nadu. In case of law and order problem in Jharkhand, most of the law and order problem in Jharkhand deals with Naxalism. But in case of Tamil Nadu, most of the law and order problem comes from casteism as well as normal petty cases like thief, robbery, murder, all those things. So the law and order profile of each and every state is completely different. So it requires regional care. So that's why law and order is kept under state list. Agriculture scenario, agriculture profile in northeastern states is completely different from agriculture scenario in Rajasthan. They have different types of soils, there are different type of climate. So agriculture requires regional care. So that's why agriculture is kept under state list. Now, what are the matters which come under concurrent list? Example: health, education. So these matters require cooperation between central government as well as state government. So that's why these matters will come under concurrent list, not any other list. Is it clear, everyone? Is it clear? Now we have discussed the lists, right? Now we have discussed the demarcation of subjects into central list, state list as well as concurrent list. But there will be certain scenarios. Even though the list has been clearly demarcated, the division is not watertight. Clear? There are certain scenarios where there will be confusion, where a particular subject, whether they will come under state list or central list. I'll give you one scenario. I'll give you an example. Now take an example of Naxal shooting in Jharkhand. Take an example of Naxal shooting in Jharkhand. Now, state government will interpret this Naxal shooting as law and order problem. They will think that this particular problem is law and order problem. But what will central government think? Central government will think that this Naxal shooting is a matter of national security. Now, law and order problem comes from state list. National security comes from central list. So there is a conflict between central list as well as state list. If there is a conflict between central list and state list, what will happen is that central list will prevail over state list. Clear? If there is a conflict between central list and state list, central list will prevail over state list. Similarly, central list will prevail over concurrent list. Clear? Now between state list and concurrent list, which will prevail? Concurrent list will prevail over state list. So the list subjects have been demarcated based on increasing preference to increasing power to central government. So can we conclude central list prevails over concurrent list, concurrent list prevails over state list? Can we conclude like that? Central list prevails over concurrent list prevails over state list. Now this principle is not explicitly mentioned in the constitution. Explicitly mentioned in the constitution. So if it's not explicitly mentioned in the constitution, how are we interpreting central list is powerful than state list? Because constitution has implied a certain principle called as doctrine of federal supremacy. Constitution has implied a certain principle called as doctrine of federal supremacy. So based on this doctrine of federal supremacy, which is implied in the constitution, what is doctrine of federal supremacy? It says that central government is more powerful compared to state government. So based on this doctrine, we can interpret that central list is more powerful compared to concurrent list, and concurrent list is more powerful compared to state list. Clear? This is very important. Doctrine of federal supremacy. This word is not used in the Lakshmikant book. There is a possibility that this word can be used in means question. If UPSC is asking question like what can you interpret from doctrine of federal supremacy? Does India need to follow the doctrine of federal supremacy? If UPSC questions ask questions like that, just by reading Lakshmikant alone, you cannot answer that question. So remember this particular doctrine of federal supremacy. Not only that, if you are using such words in your mains answer writing, your answer writing will stand out from other papers. Not many students can write this doctrine of federal supremacy. Clear? Not only this doctrine of federal supremacy, there are other doctrines like doctrine of extraterritoriality, doctrine of territorial nexus. These are not mentioned in your Lakshmikant book. So do remember these doctrines. Yeah. Now excuse me for a moment here. Now see here. Now we have discussed doctrine of federal supremacy, right? Now when constitution was envisaged, central list included 97 lists. Now after various amendments, this number was increased to 100. Clear? State list included 67 lists. This was reduced to 61 lists. Clear? Now concurrent list has been increased from 49 to 52. Is it clear? So central list has around 100 subjects, state list has around 61 subjects, and the concurrent list has around 52 subjects. So totally we have around 213 subjects. Totally we have around 213 subjects. But now these 213 subjects was devised in 1950 itself, right? From 1950 to 2020, the amount of subjects in under the 7th schedule is same, that is 213. The amount of subjects under 7th schedule is same, that is 213. Now, based on modern developments, there will be certain subjects which was not there in 1950. For example, things like cyber security, things like biotechnology, things like service tax. Service tax was introduced only after 1980s. It was not there before. So these are some modern developments. This will not be included in the original 7th schedule. Now these subjects will be termed as residuary list. These subjects will be termed as residuary list. Okay. Now what is residuary list? Subjects which are not mentioned in the schedule list, 7th schedule, will be termed as residuary list. Now who can make laws on residuary list? Only Parliament. Clear? Who can make laws on residuary list? Only Parliament. In case of central list, who will make laws on them? Parliament. State list, state legislature will make laws on them. In case of concurrent list, who will make laws on them? It will be made by both Parliament as well as state legislature. Clear? Now we will move on to the next part. Now this division of power into central list, state list and concurrent list is followed during normal circumstances. This division of power is between state list, central list as well as concurrent list is followed during normal circumstances. During extraordinary circumstance, this division of power, central list, state list as well as concurrent list, will go away. So in all these matters, Parliament is empowered to make laws on central list as well as state list as well as concurrent list. Clear? Is it clear? During normal circumstances, the power is divided between central list, state list as well as concurrent list. But during extraordinary circumstances, the power is the division of power is vanished. Even Parliament can make laws on state list. Now what are those extraordinary circumstances? I will discuss here. Extraordinary circumstances. What are those extraordinary circumstances? Those extraordinary circumstances are included in Article 249. What does Article 249 say? In national interest. Next one is Article 250. During national emergency. The next one is Article 252. When plurality of states make a request. Next one is Article 253. To implement international agreements. Lastly, Article 356. During state emergency. Clear? During normal circumstances, state legislature can only make laws on state list, but during extraordinary circumstances, Parliament is empowered to make laws on state list. Is it clear? Now what are those extraordinary circumstances? One is Article 249, next one is Article 250, Article 252, Article 253 as well as Article 356. Now we will discuss these individual articles very in depth. Clear? We will discuss these individual articles in a very in-depth manner on what are the differences between various articles, on what are the provisions under these various articles we will discuss. Clear? Now see here, First one is extraordinary circumstances, Article 249, that is in national interest. In national interest. See, in national interest, if Rajya Sabha passes a resolution, in national interest, if Rajya Sabha passes a resolution, now that resolution has to be passed by around 2/3 of members, present and voting. 2/3 of members present and voting. Now this majority is very important because this majority will be used in only two circumstances. If you read your Lakshmikant book, it will mention, it will give only special majority, but nowhere in Indian constitution they have used the word special majority and simple majority. Rather than using special majority and simple majority, they will actually give the majority. What is the majority required for each provision? There are two, even in special majority, there are 4 different types of special majority. Clear? Now, this is one type of special majority. So, if questions are being asked regarding majority in UPSC prelims, questions will not, statements will not include words like special majority. Rather than using special majority, they will use the actual wording itself. Clear? For instance, this 2/3 of members present and voting is different from 2/3 of members voting. 2/3 of members present and voting plus half the number of legislature voting for it. So these are different types of special majority. Now you have to keep that in mind. Now this majority will be used for only 2 articles. One is for Article 249, which we are discussing now. Another one is Article 312. Now what is Article 312 deals with? Article 312 deals with creation of All India Services. Now who creates All India Services? Rajya Sabha. So this type of majority will be used by any resolution passed by Rajya Sabha for the interest of state. Clear? For the interest of state, based on Article 249 as well as Article 312. So if Rajya Sabha is passing a resolution based on 2/3 of members present and voting, in that case, Parliament can make laws on state list. Is it clear? If Rajya Sabha is passing this resolution, Parliament can make laws on state list. Now listen here, what is Rajya Sabha doing? What is Parliament doing? Parliament, they are forcibly taking the power away from state legislature. Without the consent of state legislature, they are taking away this power. Since they are forcibly taking away this power, will this law be permanent? It will not be permanent, because if it is permanent, it will violate the federal structure, right? So the life of law under Article 249 is temporary. It is temporary. It is not permanent, it is temporary. So what is the life of law under Article 249? See, once a resolution has been passed, once Rajya Sabha has passed this resolution, in this resolution itself they will list, Parliament can make laws on certain state list subjects. For example, Parliament can make laws on education, so not education, agriculture, which is mentioned in state list. So Parliament is empowered to make laws on agriculture now. So the life of law made under this resolution is 1 year. The life of law made under this resolution is 1 year. Now can we extend beyond this 1 year? Yes. Based on subsequent Rajya Sabha resolution, this law can be extended for another 1 year. Okay? So it can be extended for n number of years by means of passing Rajya Sabha resolution. After resolution has expired, what is the life of this resolution? The life of this resolution is for 1 year. After this resolution has expired, the law will continue for another 6 months. After the expiry of this resolution, this law will continue for another 6 months. So tell me now, what will be the life of law under What is the equation for life of law under Article 249? The life of law under Article 249 is equal to n. N into 1 year plus 6 months. Clear? N into 1 year plus 6 months. What is the letter N denote? N denotes number of times Rajya Sabha resolution has been passed. Clear? N denotes number of times Rajya Sabha resolution has been passed into 1 year plus 6 months. So that's the life of law under Article 249. Now importantly, under Article 249, what is happening under Article 249? What is happening? Parliament is making laws on state list. Under Article 249, even the Parliament is making laws on state list, still state legislature is also empowered to make laws on state list. State legislature is also functioning, right? So, for example, resolution is passed in the Rajya Sabha. This resolution is saying that Parliament can make laws on agriculture. Even though Parliament can make laws on agriculture, still state legislature also can make laws on state legislature also can make laws on agriculture. In that case, if both of them are passing laws on agriculture in the same field itself, what will happen? There is a conflict between parliamentary law as well as state law. Under Article 249, since state legislature is also functioning, there will be a conflict between parliamentary law and state law. In that case, what will happen is that in case of that conflict, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. Parliamentary law will prevail over state law. Is it clear? In case of conflict between parliamentary law and state law under Article 249, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. This is called as doctrine of repugnancy. This is called as doctrine of repugnancy. It is given in Article 251. Is it clear? During Article 249, if both Parliament as well as state legislature are empowered to make laws on state list, so there will be a conflict between parliamentary law as well as state law. In that case, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. That concept is called as doctrine of repugnancy, which is given in Article 251. Is it clear, everyone? Now let's move on to the next extraordinary circumstance of next extraordinary circumstance is Article 250, that is during national emergency. See, during national emergency, what happens is during national emergency, Parliament is empowered to make law on state list. Clear? During national emergency, Parliament is empowered to make laws on state list. Excuse me, okay. During national emergency, Parliament is empowered to make laws on state list. Clear? Similarly, similar to Article 249, the power of state legislature is forcibly taken away from state legislature. Power of state legislature on state list is forcibly taken away from state legislature. So that's why life of law under national emergency under Article 250 is equal to life of national emergency plus 6 months. Is it clear? Life of law under Article 250 is life of national emergency itself plus 6 months. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, even in case of national emergency, what will happen? Even in case of national emergency, both Parliament can make laws on state list. Also, state legislature is also functioning. Unlike state emergency, in case of national emergency, state legislature as well as state executive will continue to function. So, state legislature is also is allowed to make laws on state list. Is it clear? So, there will be two laws. There will be parliamentary law as well as there will be a conflict between parliamentary law as well as state law. Similar to Article 249, there will be a conflict between parliamentary law as well as state law. In that case, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. In that case, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. Is it clear, everyone? Parliamentary law will prevail over state law. It is also based on the principle of doctrine of repugnancy, which is given in Article 251. Clear? Which is given in Article 251. Now, so we have discussed Article 251. First, we have to mention what is Article 251. Article 251 provides for one, as I mentioned before, doctrine of repugnancy. Doctrine of repugnancy. Now, this doctrine of repugnancy applies only to Article 249 as well as Article 250. This doctrine of repugnancy applies to only two articles, that is Article 249 as well as Article 250. Is it clear? Now let's discuss another topic for today. Let's just give me a moment here. I'll to go. See, under Article 251, another important thing that you have to keep in mind is that it applies, this doctrine of repugnancy applies only to state list. Doctrine of repugnancy, this Article 259 applies only to laws made under state list, also under laws made under Article 249 as well as 250. So these are the exceptions provided for Article 251. Okay, now let's move on to the next exception for today. Next exception is Article 356. Article 356 talks about state emergency. State emergency. Now, before going on to the topic itself, we have to discuss what are the differences between what are the differences that will happen during national emergency and state emergency. What happens to state government during national emergency and state emergency? See, during national emergency, both state executive as well as state legislature, they function. Okay? During national emergency, both state executive as well as state legislature, they will function normally. But during state emergency, state executive is dismissed. State executive is dismissed. What happens to state legislature? They are either suspended or dissolved. State legislature is either suspended or dissolved. State legislature is either suspended or dissolved. So state legislature will not function during state emergency. In case of national emergency, state legislature also functions, but in case of state emergency, state legislature does not function. So what happens is that since state legislature is not functioning, what happens is that president, he will take away the powers of he will take the powers of state legislature. He will take the powers of state legislature and he will give these powers. He will delegate these powers to parliament. Here he will delegate the powers of state legislature to parliament. So instead of state legislature doing the passing state laws, this power is being transferred to parliament for a temporary period. Who is transferring this power? President is transferring this power. Okay, so now understand the difference here. In case of Article 214 as well as Article 250, what is happening? Parliament is forcefully taking away the power from state legislature. But in the case of Article 356, what is happening? They are being delegated, they are being transferred. So the life of law under Article 356 is permanent. Life of law under Article 356 is permanent. But importantly, after a new state legislature has been convened, this new state legislature can either amend this law passed by the parliament. They can repeal this particular law passed by the parliament, or they can do nothing. If they are doing nothing, what will happen? This law passed by the parliament will continue for indefinite period. Okay. If they, instead of doing nothing, if they are amending that particular parliamentary law, they can do so. If they want to repeal this particular parliamentary law, they can repeal. If they are not doing anything, this law will continue for an indefinite period. Okay. Now let's compare. Now I hope everything is crystal clear regarding Article 356. Now let's compare. Now let's compare Article 250 and Article 356. Let's compare Article 250 and Article 356. See here, in Article 250, what we discuss? First, state legislature is not suspended. State legislature is not suspended. But in case of Article 356, state legislature cannot function. Since state legislature is not suspended and they can function, there will be conflict between parliamentary law as well as state law. So doctrine of repugnancy will apply. Doctrine of repugnancy will apply. But in case of Article 356, doctrine of repugnancy doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. Now another crucial difference, what is the life of law under Article 250? It is temporary. It is temporary, but in case of Article 356, it is permanent. It is permanent. So these are the differences between Article 250 as well as Article 356. Now let's take a look at next exception, that is Article 252. Clear? Now in Article 252, when two or more states pass a resolution, now that resolution has to be passed by simple majority. Now that resolution will delegate the power of state legislature on a particular state list to Parliament. In that case, Parliament can make laws on state list. Clear? In the resolution passed by two or more states, they will list that Parliament, we are giving this power to Parliament to legislate on one state list or other state list. Clear? So in that case, the state governments, they are willingly surrendering their power to Parliament. In that case, Parliament can make laws on state list. Now, as I mentioned before, states are willingly giving their power to Parliament. So since the states are willingly giving their power to Parliament, life of law under Article 252 is permanent. It is therefore permanent period. Okay. Also, parliamentary law under Article 252 applies to only states that make the request. Clear? It applies to only states that make the request. Clear? And also, if this parliamentary law has to be amended or repealed. Clear? If this parliamentary law has to be amended or repealed, it can be only done by Parliament. Clear? It can be done only by Parliament, not state legislature. Clear? If that particular parliamentary law is being passed under Article 252, that law can be either amended or repealed only by Parliament, not state legislature. And also, if more states want to join this parliamentary law under Article 252, more states can join at a future date. After this resolution has been passed itself, some states can join this Article 252. Clear? Resolution under Article 252. Is it clear? So this is the gist that happens during Article 252. What happens during Article 252? States, they are willingly giving their power to Parliament by passing a resolution under simple majority. Since the states are willingly giving their power to Parliament, life of law under Article 252 will be permanent. And also, parliamentary law under Article 252, it applies to only states that make the request. And also, in future date, more states can join this resolution, and law passed under Article 252, if anyone wants to amend as well as repeal those parliamentary law, only Parliament can do that, not state legislature. Is it clear? I hope everything is clear. If you have any doubts, ask in the comment sections. I'll try to answer those. Now, last extraordinary circumstance of under center-state relations, that is Article 253. See, under Article 253, to implement international agreements, Parliament can make laws on state list. Clear? To implement international agreement, Parliament is empowered to make laws on state list. I'll give you an example. Take the example of trade facilitation agreement, which was signed by India under WTO. It was signed by India under WTO. Now, what subject do trade facilitation agreement deal with? It deals with the subject called as agriculture. It deals with agriculture. Agriculture is in state list. Now, to implement this trade facilitation agreement, is it desirable to pass this trade facilitation agreement by individual states? Will individual states pass this? So it will take, when individual states pass this, implement this trade facilitation agreement, it will take a lot of time, because some states will have objections. Some states will be the government, state government will be different to that of central government. So just so to piss off central government, they will not pass this trade facilitation agreement. So to prevent that from happening, to implement international agreements, Parliament is empowered to make laws on state list. Not only trade facilitation agreement, take the case of Paris Accord. Now, to implement Paris Accord, we have to increase forest cover. Now, forest comes under state list. Clear? Now, if forest is coming under state list, central government cannot make laws on forest, right? So, to prevent that from happening, to implement international agreements such as Paris Accord as well as trade facilitation agreement, Parliament can make laws on state list. Clear? Now, these are the scenarios based on which Parliament can make laws on state list. Clear? Now, excuse me for a moment here. I hope everything was clear to you. If you have any doubts regarding the topics concepts that I have taught today, you can ask in the comment sections. Now, before going on to central's control over state legislation, we will talk about Article 254. Now, what is this Article 254? Article 254 doesn't talk about Parliament control over state list. It talks about concurrent list, especially doctrine of repugnancy over concurrent list. See, there are two doctrine of repugnancy. One doctrine of repugnancy is given in Article 251. That repugnancy deals with only laws passed under state list, but this doctrine of repugnancy deals with laws passed over concurrent list. As I mentioned before, in case of concurrent list, both Parliament as well as state legislature can make laws on matters mentioned in concurrent list. So obviously, if two governments are legislating on the same subject, there will be a conflict between parliamentary law as well as state legislation. In that case, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. Clear? Parliamentary law will prevail over state law, but there is an exception. For example, I'll give you an example. This is India. Clear? This is India. This is state. Now there is a state law. There is a parliamentary law. If there is a conflict between these two laws, parliamentary law will prevail over state law. But the state government wants this law very badly. Okay, state government wants this state law very badly. They want to supersede this parliamentary law very badly. I'll give you an example. In 2017, in Tamil Nadu, one very important event happened called as Jallikattu protests. Now, prevention of cruelty to animals comes under concurrent list. Animal husbandry comes under, animal protection comes under concurrent list. So during Jallikattu protests, there was a conflict between Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act versus Jallikattu Regulation Act. There was a conflict between central law as well as state law, which comes under subject of concurrent list. Now, the basis of Jallikattu protest was for the prevalence of state law over parliamentary law. State government wanted that Jallikattu Regulation Act should prevail over parliamentary law. Now, to make that happen, this state law was reserved by the governor. For president's consideration. Clear? to make state law powerful, to make state law prevail over parliamentary law, governor reserved this law for consideration of president. Now if president is giving his assent for a particular state law in concurrent list, in that case state law will prevail over parliamentary law. Clear? If president is giving his assent to a particular state law mentioned in concurrent list, in that case state law will prevail over parliamentary law, that is given under article 254. Clear? Now let's move on to the third subdivision under legislative relations. Third subdivision under legislative relations talks about central government control over state legislation. Central government control over state legislation. So that's what we will talk about in this particular topic. See, what happens during what is the process of passing state legislation? If state legislation has to be passed, a bill has to be introduced in state legislature, either in state legislative assembly or state legislative council. Clear? State bill has to be introduced in state legislature, either in state legislative assembly or state legislative council. After a bill has been passed in both the houses, this bill will be sent to governor's assent. Clear? This bill will be sent to governor's assent. Now governor in certain cases can reserve state legislation for the consideration of president. Clear? For the consideration of president, governor can reserve certain bills. Now in that manner only central government will exercise control over state legislation, which means that without the approval of central government, those legislations cannot be passed by state legislature. Okay? That's what we talk about in central government's control over state legislation. Yeah. Now what are the scenarios? Where central government can exercise control over state legislation? Now those scenarios are mentioned in Article 200, Article 201, Article 301, and then Article 288 clause 2. Clear? And then lastly Article 360. Clear? So these are the scenarios which are mentioned in the articles during which governor can reserve any bill. So governor can reserve certain bills for the consideration of president. Now first thing is Article 200. Clear? So under Article 200 what is being talked about? Under Article 200, governor can reserve any bill, can reserve any bill for the consideration of president. Clear? Under Article 200, governor can reserve any bill for the consideration of president. Now importantly, under Article 200, it's at the discretion of governor whether to reserve a particular bill to president or not. Governor will decide whether they can reserve bill to president or not. But there are certain scenarios where governor has to compulsorily reserve those bills to president. Now what are those scenarios? Those scenarios are mentioned in Article 200, so 201. Article 201. Now in Article 201, if any bill endangers the position of High Court, if any bill endangers the position of High Court, in that case governor can reserve the bill to president. Clear? If any bill endangers the position of High Court, in that case governor has to compulsorily reserve that particular bill to President of India. Clear? Now next scenario is Article 301. Next scenario is Article 301. See, from Article 301 to Article 304, they talk about interstate commerce. They talk about interstate commerce. See, Clause 1 of Article 301 guarantees a constitutional right called as freedom of commerce. It guarantees a right called as freedom of commerce, wherein any establishment in any state can trade in any state. For example, they have their industry in Maharashtra. They can send their goods to Tamil Nadu without any restriction. That's the concept of freedom of commerce. Clear? Any industry within any state can trade with all the other states in India. So that's the concept of freedom of commerce. Now, in second clause of Article 301, they have mentioned that any bill passed by state legislature that restricts freedom of commerce has to be reserved by governor to president's consideration. Clear? If Tamil Nadu wants to curtail trade from Kerala, that bill has to be sent to president's consideration because it violates constitutional right called as freedom of commerce, and India follows federal country and all federal units have been given with federal freedom of commerce. So any bill that violates this interstate commerce will be reserved by governor for president's consideration. Is it clear? Now, if you have any doubts regarding any topics that I have taught today, ask in the comment sections. I will try to answer those. Now, the next scenario where central government will exercise control over state legislation is Article 288 Clause 2. Article 288 Clause 2. Now, in Article 288 Clause 2, in Article 288, central government can establish enterprises for distribution, storage of both electricity and water. Clear? Under Article 288 Clause 1, central government can establish enterprises for distribution, storage of electricity and water. Clear? Now, I'll give an example. Kakrapur nuclear power plant. Now, this Kakrapur nuclear power plant was established by central government in Rajasthan. It is an establishment of central government, and central government has a right to establish those industries in state government such as Rajasthan. Now, state government, they are empowered to impose taxes on those establishments. Clear? If state government wants to impose taxes on Kakrapur nuclear power plant, they can do so. But the only catch is that the bill that introduced these taxes has to be reserved by governor for president's consideration. Clear? One, what does Article 288 say? Under Article 288, central government can establish enterprises for distribution as well as storage of electricity as well as water, and importantly, state government are empowered to impose taxes on these establishments. But if they want to impose the taxes on central government establishments, that bill for imposition of taxes has to be reserved by the governor for president's consideration. So that's the control that has been established under Article 288. Clear? Now let's talk about the last topic under central government control. This Article 360. What is Article 360? It talks about financial emergency. See, during Article 360, during financial emergency, what happens? The entire country will be facing financial crunch. Financial funds will be very meager. So, to prevent state governments from indiscriminately spending meager financial funds, to prevent state governments from spending meager financial funds that is available with India, President can request Governor to reserve any bill, to reserve any bill for the consideration of president. Clear? In the lieu of financial preparatory, president can request governor to reserve any bill for the consideration of president, because during financial emergency, central government has to prevent state government from spending meager financial resources indiscriminately. To prevent from that happening, state government's bill can be instructed by the president to reserve that for president's consideration. Okay, so these are the scenarios where central government can exercise control over state legislation. So no, sorry, not state list. I mentioned wrongly here. Where the central government can exercise control over state legislation. What are the scenarios? Article 200, Article 201, and Article 301, Article 288 Clause 2, and Article 360. Okay. So we have completed the class. Now if you have any doubts regarding the class that I have taught you today, you can ask in the comment section, and I will try to answer all those comments that you have asked in the comment section. And if you have any doubts regarding any topic in polity, ask in the comment section. Now today we have discussed administrative relations, right? Today we have discussed administrative relations. Sorry, not administrative. We have discussed legislative relations. Apart from legislative relations, there is administrative as well as financial relations. So I will take separate class for administrative relations and separate class for financial relations. So do follow Unacademy's YouTube channel so that you get access to these videos regularly. And also I'll be taking videos on current affairs which are very important for UPSC prelims examination. Clear? So do follow Unacademy's YouTube channel, and if you wish to contact me, you can contact me via this number 94432-18545, either via WhatsApp or Telegram. This is my contact number. If you have any doubts, you can contact me in this number. So yeah. Now to revise those topics, we'll just take a look at we'll just take a quick look at the topics that we have discussed today. See, first we are talking about federalism. In federalism, what is the definition? It's a type of government where there are two or more levels of government, and these two or more levels of government should have division of power. So in center-state relations, we will talk about in what areas central government is supreme, in what areas state government is supreme, also in what areas they cooperate with each other. Clear? So we will discuss all these aspects from three areas. One is legislative area, administrative area, and financial area. We will not be discussing about judicial area because India follows integrated system of judiciary, not federal system of judiciary. Clear? Now in case of legislative relations, we will talk about the division of power during normal circumstances, division of power during normal circumstances, and division of power during extraordinary circumstances. Okay? Extraordinary circumstances. Now during normal circumstances, the territorial application of central law, territorial application of central law will apply either for throughout of India or any part of India. Similarly, state law will apply throughout state or any part of the state. But importantly, this power of state law as well as central law is called as territorial jurisdiction, whereas in case of state they don't have the power of extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now this principle is called as doctrine of extraterritoriality. By this doctrine, only parliament is empowered to make laws on extraterritorial subjects, but there is an exception here. If there is a significant nexus between the person as well as state concern, in that case doctrine of extraterritoriality will not apply. That particular doctrine is called as doctrine of territorial nexus. Clear? Now let's move on to the next topic. Now parliamentary law, even though they are applicable for all of India, there are certain areas where the parliamentary law is not applicable. Those areas include Union Territories, Schedule 5 as well as Schedule 6 areas, and Article 371 areas. Now we will not be discussing about Schedule 5 as well as Schedule 6 areas as well as Article 371 areas. Now in case of Union Territory, under Article 240, President is empowered to make regulations for betterment of union territories. Now those regulations will have the force of law. Since they have the force of law, President can either repeal or amend or accept any particular parliamentary law. Clear? Now, what is the distribution of legislative power subjects? Now, legislative power is distributed based on three subjects, which include central list, state list as well as concurrent list. In central list, only parliament can make laws on them. In case of state list, only state legislature can make laws on them. In case of concurrent list, both parliament as well as state legislature can make laws on them. Clear? But in case of any overlap between these lists, what will happen? Central list will prevail over state list. Sorry, central list will prevail over concurrent list, and concurrent list will prevail over state list. Now this division of power into central list, state list as well as concurrent list happens during normal circumstances. During extraordinary circumstances, parliament can legislate on all these three circumstances. Clear? Sorry, parliament can legislate on all these three lists. Now, what are those extraordinary circumstances? Those extraordinary circumstances include national interest, which is mentioned in Article 249, Article 250, Article 252, Article 253, and then Article 356. Now, let's take a brief differences between Article 249 and other articles. So, in case of Article 249 as well as Article 250, Parliament is forcibly taking away the power from state legislature. So, the laws under these two articles will be temporary. And importantly, Article 251, that is our doctrine of repugnancy, will apply in case of these two articles. Now, a doctrine of repugnancy will not apply in these three articles. Also, all these three articles are permanent. Clear? The life of law under Article 249 as well as Article 250 is temporary, but in case of all these other articles, the life of law is permanent and doctrine of repugnancy will not apply. Okay. Now this is the difference between national emergency and law passed during national emergency and law passed during state emergency. State legislature is not suspended during national emergency, whereas in case of Article 356, state legislature cannot function. So that's why doctrine of repugnancy will apply. Doctrine of repugnancy does not apply here. Law passed under Article 250 is temporary and law passed under Article 356 is permanent. Clear? And lastly, we will talk about Article 254. Article 254 also talks about the concept of doctrine of repugnancy, but in earlier case it applies only for laws made under state list, but Article 254 repugnancy applies laws made under concurrent list. So if parliamentary law as well as state law exists in the same subject, in that case parliamentary law will prevail over state law. But if state wants this law very badly, the governor can reserve certain bills to president's consideration. If president is giving his assent, in that case state law will prevail over parliamentary law. Clear? Now next topic is central government's control over state legislation. Now there are 5 scenarios based on which central government can exercise control over state legislation. One is Article 200, Article 201, Article 301, Article 288 clause 2 and Article 360. Under Article 200, governor can reserve any bill for the consideration of president. So it's at the discretion of governor to reserve any bill. Okay. Now in case of Article 201, if a bill endangers the position of High Court, governor can reserve those bills to president's consideration. Under Article 301, if any state legislation bill curtails interstate freedom of commerce, those bills can be reserved for president's consideration. Also, any taxes that imposes any bill that imposes taxes on establishment made by central government for distribution of water as well as electricity, those bills has to be reserved for consideration of president. And lastly, Article 360, during financial emergency, president can request governor to reserve any bill for the consideration of president. Clear? So this is the gist of administrative relations under center-state relations. Next class we will discuss administrative relations, and last class we will discuss financial relations. So do follow Unacademy's YouTube channel. Now that's it, gentlemen. Now have a wonderful day, and let's see you in next class. Thank you everyone.